Hello, guten Tag, and welcome to another cinematography breakdown. And it's an interview again. Well, kinda. It was a Q&A for a dental clinic. The interesting part here is that we didn't have a lot of time, and this was really spontaneous. We shot a commercial for them, and then the client asked us in between, hey, do we have enough time to film about 20 Q&As for our website? And we decided to squeeze it in. And this video is sponsored by Motion VFX because they came out with a new and exciting plugin, but more on that later. Let's get right into it and let's talk about the camera equipment that we used. We only brought one camera to shoot the commercial with, so we only had one camera to shoot all of the Q&As as well. The camera that we did use was the original red Komodo. The lens that we used was the Sigma 18-35, and this is also what we used for about 80% of the commercial that we shot. For all of the Q&As that we shot, we set our 18-35 to 22mm. To get rid of that digital sharpness and also to smoothen out the skin tones a bit, we used a Nisi 1/4 strength black mist filter. I also used my iPad Pro with the Red Control app to monitor the interviews while we were recording, so I didn't have to stand directly next to the camera to see the 7-inch on top of the camera. The camera sat on my Sachtler Flowtech 75, and that's all the camera equipment that we needed. Now let's talk a bit about our camera settings. We set the ISO to 800, and this is usually a good sweet spot for the Red Komodo, so I'll just leave it there whenever I can. And we also shot everything wide open at a T2.0 with our Sigma 18-35. We shot everything at 25 frames with a 180-degree shutter, and we set the color temperature of the Red Komodo to 3800 Kelvin. And I will talk about this a little more in the lighting section. Now let's talk a bit about the composition, and there's not that much to say. We had our subject placed slightly off to the right, looking towards the left. But we wanted to have them relatively centered, because that would make it easier for a jump cut, because we only had one camera, and if we had to make a cut and zoom in where we didn't have any B-roll, then having a centered subject makes it a little bit easier. We also moved some furniture around in the background and put some decorations and flowers here and there to not make the background too boring, but not have it overly busy either. We also placed our subject in a way where we had some leading lines towards our subject so that there's nothing too distracting in the background or on the sides. Also, with the open door in the background, we got some levels to it because we wanted to create some depth with all the furniture and just the room in general. When it came to creating levels, patterns and depth, we did all of this with lighting. And again, I will talk about this a little later. But other than this, there wasn't really anything special about this composition. What is special though is Motion VFX new plugin Cine Studio. Motion VFX has just released their brand new subscription-based software Cine Studio, and with it, two really exciting plugins. The first plugin, and this is also my absolute favorite, is MRoto AI, and that lets you create masks and also tracks them within Final Cut Pro 10. And this isn't restricted to certain objects like cars, faces or people. No, you can actually track any item you want, and it's very easy just by selecting it. And this is a feature that I've been waiting for so long, and I was this close to switching to DaVinci Resolve just for the AI masking tools. But now you can do it within Final Cut Pro with the help of MRoto AI for Motion VFX. The possibilities here are really endless. The other plugin is called M-Tracker Surface, and this is a really advanced planar tracker or surface tracker where you can just attach your textures to anything within Final Cut Pro, and this is really precise and as easy as MRoto AI. So go ahead and check it out, there's a link down in the description below. Now before we talk about the lighting in detail, let's quickly talk about the audio. When it comes to the equipment that we used, I have no idea what we used because I hired a dedicated sound guy.
We don't know!
And all I know is he used a boom microphone as well as a hidden lavalier microphone, and then he mixed everything on set and gave me everything afterwards. And this made my life so much easier because now I had all these audio files and they were all correctly labeled to our scenes, and all I had to do was synchronize everything in post. So if you can, always hire a dedicated sound person because then you can concentrate on the story as well as the visuals. And now let's talk about the lighting, which is always my favorite topic when it comes to shooting interviews or basically any scene in general. On set, we already had a lot of lights that we needed to factor in. There were multiple spotlights on the ceiling as well as just a bigger ceiling light. Also in the background there were some lights in different color temperatures, so we needed to assess what kind of lights do we have, can we control them, and then expose for our scene and the available light that we had. There was also a window in the background that you could slightly see, but that didn't emit too much light, so everything was more on the tungsten base. And I actually liked the lights that we had because they created patterns, especially the spotlights and where they hit the floor, because you can see that it created a dark and bright pattern, and that made for more depth in our image. Unfortunately, we did have some spotlights right above our talent, and we had two choices. Either we flag this off or we just turn off the lights. And we decided it's easier to just unscrew one of the light bulbs where the spot hit our subject and therefore get rid of the light. And this is something that you should always do because you really need to control your light in your scene. There was also a door that led into another room, and we wanted to create a bit of a color contrast to all the tungsten lights that we had in the foreground, and we used one of our Nanlite Pavo tubes just to emit a bit of a cooler color around 5000 Kelvin. Not only did this create color contrast, but it also added more layers to our scene and therefore gave us more depth. For our key light, we used the Intelitech Mega Light Cloth 2.0, and we used this for most parts of this commercial because the space that we had was really narrow, and the Intelitech Mega Light Cloth is amazing in small spaces. Unfortunately, the Mega Light Cloth 2.0 only comes with half of a stop of diffusion, which I always think is a little too low, so we double diffused it. The updated version 3.0 comes with a bigger softbox with more diffusion materials and different choices, so you have half stop, 1 stop, 1.5 stop, etc. And there's also a lot of other features that they improved upon. So if you're interested in this light, which you should because it's amazing and I use it for almost everything, then check out the 3.0 series. And I will put down a link in the description below. We boomed this light a little higher above our subject at around a 45-degree angle, and we also had to account for some of our talents wearing glasses, and therefore it was really helpful that we had such a huge light source and that we could easily angle it up above our subject. We set the color temperature of our key light to around 5000 Kelvin because we wanted to have it a bit cooler, because you could also see a window in the background, and we kind of wanted to give off that there might be another window and that this is where the light is coming from. We also wanted to create even more color contrast to the tungsten light that was all around the room. If we would have matched our key light to the color temperature of all the tungsten lights in the room, then everything would have looked the same. Either we would have matched our color temperature on the camera to all the lights in the room, and then everything would just look boringly plain, or we would have had a way too warm or way too cool look. By setting the color temperature of this light a little higher, as well as the background light that we created in the doorway, we created a lot of color contrast here. We also really didn't like the plain white wall in the background because it looked really boring and unprofessional. So what we did is we took a Nanlite Forza 60B2 with a 19-degree spotlight mount. Then we created a fake window and projected it towards the back wall. And this is something that really impressed the client, and he couldn't stop talking about it because this was his favorite thing about this interview setup. Overall, since our image should look really inviting and happy, we didn't want to have too much contrast. And since we had to boom our light up high because of all the people wearing glasses, we also brought in a fill light. The fill light we brought in was another Intelitech light mat, and we placed it on our camera right just to fill in the shadows on the shadow side of our subject. And here we used the Intelitech Light Cloth 2.0 with a softbox and a grid. That's it for the lighting. Last but not least, let's talk a little bit about the color grading. The color grading on this was fairly simple. We shot everything in red raw with a lock color space. Then, in order to get it back to Rec 709, I just used the original red LUTs. And here I used one with a medium contrast and a very soft highlight roll-off. Now afterwards, I did a bit of a color correction just to add a little bit more contrast and brighten up the image. The last thing I had to do was overlay one of my custom LUTs, and the one that I used for this one was Bluebird, and you can find it down in the description below in my Spade LUT pack. Then in post-production, all I had to do was add some B-roll from the commercial shoot that we had earlier, as well as add some titles and motion graphics, all for Motion VFX. And if you're interested in learning how to master the art of shooting interviews, then check out the link down in the description below to my interview online course. where I explain everything from lighting, storytelling, from the camera setups, the audio recording, etc., etc. I hope you liked this interview breakdown, and if you did, then please give this video a thumbs up because it really helps the channel grow, and subscribe for more because there will be more cinematography breakdowns, but this time it will be more narrative work, short films, as well as some commercials I shot, but this will have to wait until next year. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.